Hi, and welcome to the next Imminent Conversation Council Digest. I'm Laren.
And I'm Lila Marie.
And this week we are going to be talking about finding your tribe. So if you've watched any of our videos or you know anything about what we're doing, we like to do these small group discussions for women about things that are going on in our lives and things that are relevant to women as a group. So like I said, this week we talked about finding your tribe, and Lila Marie, was a really good discussion to have, especially during this time period. We're coming up on Christmas and the holiday season, and so could you tell our audience a little bit about what we mean by finding your tribe and why that's important?
Sure. Well, as Lauren mentioned, we talked about finding our tribe, and it's not really a new notion, but the terminology tribe is relatively modern and trendy, but it simply refers to finding your group, your small group of intimate friends that you allow to know you, and you know them deeply and authentically, and you allow them to speak into your life, and you do life together. And so that's what we mean by finding your tribe. And what we find that's so important about finding your tribe is that, as I alluded to, that sense of belonging that you gain. Also, you gain accountability and encouragement, and you also create this gathering of like minds and hearts that allow you to have a space to explore who you are, to have fun, those things that replenish and nourish a homemaker's heart.
All right, very good. And so, as you mentioned, finding a group where we feel supported and comfortable is not necessarily a new idea. It is something that a lot of us have strived for in the past. What were some of the reasons that women gave for why it's a struggle? Why is it a challenge for us to find those groups and to stick with it?
Well, we've been hearing a lot about isolation and being bereft of friendship. Some of the main themes that carry throughout this conversation regarding lacking a tribe are a simple disconnect, schedule, time, lifestyle, and there's also this fear of not being good enough, or being afraid of being rejected by potential peers. And so those are some of the main themes that we saw coming out.
Right. It was, there were quite a few women that were open to sharing even some of their personal fears. And I thought that was some great insight to, when you can recognize what you're afraid of, then you can finally put your foot out there and to step out there. One of the fears also that you had mentioned, and I guess it's related to being fearful, is our feelings of shame, and how that can really affect the way that we relate to somebody else. And so can you talk a little bit about that, so that women that are out there that might have all of these, a variety of feelings, shame might be one of them. How can they deal with that?
Okay, well, I came across the research of Brene Brown surrounding shame specifically, and she went on to cultivate that idea into exploring vulnerability. But she talked about the wholehearted people and how they are able to establish and maintain healthy relationships. And for those who struggle with finding the tribe or maintaining the tribe, there was a consistent issue of shame that came out. And as she explained it, and as we discussed it, shame is the fear of a disconnect or a fear of rejection. Now, why would you have that? That would be a fear of not being good enough, not measuring up, the fear of if they only knew the true me, then they may not like me. They may disconnect friendships with me. They may reject me. One of the key factors of people who are wholehearted and are able to foster healthy long-term relationships is the courage to be vulnerable, the decision that the opportunity for friendship is greater than any lack or rejection that might occur, the courage to be authentic, to present your authentic self on offer as a friend, knowing that there are no guarantees. The other person may not receive you or may not be a match, and knowing that that's okay. Now, what these wholehearted people who are able to find their tribe, they also have a strong sense of self-worth, being worthy of love, and being a worthy individual. So they feel confident that they have something to offer. And that comes from having a strong family unit. And I would also interject knowing who they are in the word where Christ tells us that we are the apple of his eye, and that he is concerned regarding us, and that he holds us in esteem.
It seems that sometimes in order to find those true friendships, in order to find that tribe, sometimes it takes a little bit of self-work too, then. Being able to be comfortable being authentic, being able to understand your worthiness as a person, as an individual, because you can't necessarily go to that friendship assuming you're going to find it in the friendship. It needs to be something you can bring to the table ahead of time, and sometimes that does take a little bit of work before you can actually find the tribe. Not to say you should wait to work on those friendships until you find that worthiness within you and from Christ. What were some other solutions that the women came up with? Not all the women struggle with fear, and not all of the women struggle with feelings of worthiness. So what were some of the other solutions to some of the problems, let's say scheduling or being busy and things like that?
Well, some of the solutions were purely practical, but they're practical choices that take courage. Being disciplined about your commitment level for your family, and learning to say no, saying notice to one thing in order to say yes to something of even greater importance, specifically in this situation, friendship. So saying yes and saying no intentionally. One answer, which it should not have surprised me, but quite honestly, I did not think of it. That was not my first thought. And it can sound pat, but it's not. It's simply prayer, because we need to prepare our hearts to know who we are before the Lord, before we offer ourselves in service or in friendship to another. So I thought that was a powerful one that we need to stop and consider and to implement wholeheartedly.
That's a really good way to put that you, being a friend, similar to being in marriage, it's not what you can get out of the relationship, it's what you can bring to it. So being prayerful, recognizing what it means to be a friend and how much energy it's going to take, putting that into that relationship. It is good to have those expectations ahead of time, and it is good to prepare yourself for that level of commitment. That's a really good way of putting it.
Yes, and just like you mentioned just now, preparing yourself in advance in relation to prayer. Also, one thing that the women talked about, it was being open and available and brave enough to go to someone, to make yourself available as a friend wherever potential friendship may present itself. I shared how for my mother, some of her best friends she made literally in the aisles of the grocery store.
Right.
And there were hours spent in the grocery store aisle initiating these divine appointments, these friendships that have lasted for decades. So you never know. So always being ready, not just for what you can get, but also for putting yourself out there.
Right. And what a difference we talked about also culturally, or in our lifetime, how much things have changed. Whereas before you might have felt comfortable talking to somebody in the aisle, and now there seems to be a little bit, you might try talking to somebody in the grocery aisle and you are immediately rejected because it's not as comfortable for some people now. But the discussion about keep pursuing it, keep trying, don't give up, don't let it be that easy.
So we talked about a lot of different challenges and solutions, and they weren't anything new, but it's good to sit down and brainstorm and bring these thoughts and ideas to the forefront. And one last thing I wanted to share, and it relates to shame and courage, putting yourself out there, is how we view other people in light of a Facebook-ready world,
right,
of the internet. Obviously, we appreciate the medium of the internet and video and so forth, and we also acknowledge that it's a tool, and that we should regard it as such. Some of these platforms don't always encourage us to share the authentic highs and lows of our lives, and so obviously we want to share the high points because we're excited about them. We want people to see us when we are looking and feeling our best. We want to share when things that are great happen to us. But if that's all that we see of other people, we assume that that's all that's going on in their lives, and that if there's something that's less than Facebook perfect, less than Instagram ready, that there must be something wrong with us. We need to acknowledge that that behind all the facades or pictures are real people, real lives, real challenges, and that we are enough.
I'm glad that you brought up the Facebook part, because when we look on Facebook or we look at some of these social media, it makes us feel as though everybody else has these friendships. It makes us feel like maybe we're the ones that are isolated, we're the ones that are not part of the group. What did you find after talking to the group of women about their level of friendships and their, did you find that they were set in their friendships? Did you find that they had their tribes as much as we think they do?
Well, what I found was that the vast majority of the women attending our group were still actively seeking their tribe. There was one out of a number of the ladies who felt as though they were set for life as far as having their tribe. But all the other women were still searching and seeking, which tells me that it's something at the forefront of all of these women's minds, and that means that it resonates and it's important. And so I think that it warrants more thought, more intention as we go after these, and that is important. We need these.
All right, great. Okay, well, I think that sums it up pretty well, what we were able to talk about as a group. And we certainly thank you very much for watching us. And as we move into this Christmas season, we would just like to remind everybody to be grateful and to thank the people that are in their lives. We really do rely on those friendships and those people around us. And so make sure that you reach out and you thank those people for standing by you. Also, consider reaching out a hand of friendship to somebody that you don't know very well. As she mentioned, there's a lot of people still looking for their tribe, and so just consider being the person that can reach out and make a difference in somebody's life. So thank you for watching, and remember, you are eminent.